Hello, thanks for joining our very first webinar for Shadow XR here at Xenith. We hope that you're staying home, staying healthy at this unprecedented time. We wanted to take this opportunity while we're all also working from home to speak directly to you and educate you on a new exciting product that we have for you. If this is your first time, hearing or seeing a Xenith presentation, I'd love to talk a little bit about what we're all about. So we create top performing headgear, equipment, and apparel to elevate the athlete's pursuit. We are truly centered around the athlete and everything that we do, and take a very design thinking, athlete-centered approach to how we think about product and what that athlete needs to perform at their best. And of course, we're top performing in the lab, particularly with the helmets, but we're also top performing on the field because we know that the athlete has attributes that aren't going to show up in a lab test that are certainly requirements to perform at their best on the field. So today we're going to be hosting a conversation about our latest innovation, Xenith Shadow XR. And I have the honor today to have Goulet, VP of Product Innovation, here with us, as well as Tom Mercer, our National Sales Director, and I'm Matthew McPhail, Xenith's Design Director. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Morning, Tom. Morning, Matthew.
So I think, kind of just diving right in, I'm super excited to have this conversation today. I think that for those that are going to be coming to Xenith for the first time and really learning about our helmet technology, I think the best place to start, the thing that makes us the most different and unique in the space is our adaptive fit system. Grant, would love for you to kind of walk us through that system.
Yeah, I think you touched on it. It really is one of the foundational elements of sort of what we call our core technology here at Xenith. And it really started with the X1 back in 2009, but it's certainly gone through a robust sort of evolution over the course of several iterations of the helmets and obviously various models that we've released now on our 5th model with Xenith Shadow XR, which you touched on. But it really is kind of core in that the essence of it is that we're wanting to provide sort of the optimal fit for the athlete, regardless of sort of head shape, hairstyle, and so forth. So making sure that, with a properly sized helmet, every time the athlete puts on a Xenith helmet, they get a great custom and secure fit. And so I think there are sort of two elements of this adaptive fit system that kind of bring it together for the athlete on the field. The first is what we call our internal shock matrix. Here we have a Xenith XR, Shadow XR clear shell helmet. I think it's possible to sort of see the internals here. One of the things that maybe is possible to call out despite some of the reflections here is that there's kind of this gray sort of substrate here which kind of holds the shocks in place. This is what we call our matrix component. And so really this is the foundational component of sort of the internal system of a Xenith helmet. And so if you think about it as a layered system, the matrix sort of floats above the head and sort of sandwiches, just duck down here, sort of sandwiches the energy control layer between the matrix and the shell. Okay, so basically the energy control layer, we have our gray shocks highlighted here. And then below the matrix on the head side is what we call our comfort layer. And so the matrix is strategically anchored to the shell such that it's allowed to sort of flex and adapt to various head shapes. And now the actuation of the matrix, what enables it to actually move on the athlete's head, is the way the lower chin strap, so which comes out and connects to the chin cup here, is actually routed all the way around the back of the head and through what we call our occipital pad. And so when the athlete actually cinches down, so pulls in the chin cup, you actually get a great sort of 360 cinch action around the head. And so it actually brings the matrix down around the head for a great, comfortable, uniform, and secure fit.
Yeah, that's a really awesome, kind of overview of the system. And I, again, highlight how differentiated that makes us in the space and how unique that technology is. I'm curious from kind of your standpoint, Tom, in the field and from your point of view, how does the adaptive fit system sort of help us differentiate with coaches and players in locker rooms?
It's a great question. I mean, it's definitely one of those things for people who are new to us. It's so foreign to what their experience has been. But the most important thing, or the biggest kind of aha moment, is when you get it on a coach's head or you get it on an athlete's head, and you put them through the process of really activating the adaptive fit and really getting the straps on and getting a good cinch down. And when they feel the cushioning conform to their head, it's a whole different feel than they've ever had before. So it makes it, although it's a little bit foreign to new customers, once they get used to it, it makes it a more efficient process for being able to fit a wider variety of shapes and sizes of heads. It gets that custom fit without having to have a custom helmet that's only good for a very narrow player offering or just specific to one individual.
Yeah, and I think what's important here too to highlight, although this conversation is obviously centered around our new flagship product, this adaptive fit system is in every helmet that we sell, right? So X2E Shadow and Shadow XR and does essentially the same thing that Grant that you so eloquently described in the kind of beginning of the chat here.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. It goes back to, the X1 through now Xenith Shadow XR onto several sort of innovations and improvements in that system too, and making it, as Tom highlighted, more user-friendly for the teams and the coaches and the equipment manager, and making sure that, it's not just, great for the athlete on the field, but it's also great for the ecosystem that supports that too. So making it user-friendly, repairable, and so forth has been, a primary motivation of ours as well.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things I love about our approach to helmet design and engineering is the thoughtfulness of the holistic product, right? And so, that adaptive fit system is a super critical, essential component. But we also look at balance and comfort, and balance specifically is a really interesting one to think about in terms of the weight, right? It's not just about the weight; it's about where that weight is located. I'd love to hear maybe a little bit more of a breakdown about how we think about weight distribution in the helmet and profile and other things, and how that affects the sensation on your head.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great question, because I think it's actually it's a disregarded attribute of helmets typically. I think usually, folks are thinking about what's the weight of the helmet. Just give me, what's that number? What's the total weight of the system? Which, granted, that's important too. And Xenith Shadow XR is certainly, actually lighter than some of the top performing competitors on the market. But the way we actually think about it is certainly a bit more holistic than just that sort of ultimate number. And you touched on sort of the term, which is balance here. And so what do we mean by balance? You can think of it sort of as the actual balance point of the helmet. So where is that weight concentrated, which might give it sort of a front heavy, back heavy, or top heavy sensation. And so through the design and engineering process, particularly with Shadow and then into Shadow XR, we were very intentional about what we would say co-locating the center of mass. So getting a little bit technical here. So co-locating the center of mass with the center of the head. What that means is that the weight distribution of the helmet is such that when you put it on, it actually feels light because the mass is concentrated at a natural point for the biomechanics of the neck and the head. So you put it on and you don't get the sensation of sort of the helmet taking you somewhere. You control the helmet, you have your natural ability and natural agility on the field, which we know protection on the field is about more than just sort of impact mitigation. It's about avoiding the hit altogether. And how you do that is you enable the athlete's sort of innate performance. You don't want to take away any of their speed and their agility on the field. And so by giving them this really great and balanced helmet, you allow them to move naturally and be optimally protected on the field.
And I think, what you're talking about there in terms of how we approach the design and performance is something that is definitely proven out on the field. I mean, we have a lot of interactions with athletes, with coaches, with organizations, and Tom, I know we hear this all the time, right? That balance, once they get it on their head and understand what that word means, is something that they really understand and get, and it's something that we hear a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know that when we describe balance to them, I don't know that it really registers until they put the helmet on. And the most kind of common comment you'll hear from players, especially your varsity level, your high school, college, and even your pro players, of like, wow, this is a really light helmet, or this is the lightest helmet I've worn, or this is so much lighter than what I wore last year. And then, we know that the weight is not that different, if at all. It might be the exact same weight of what they said they wore the previous year, but it just feels so much more balanced on their head. And as in the natural thing, once they get it on and get it, fit to their head, then they're instantly doing the neck movements of, how it feels. And it just, you don't get that whole movement of the helmet trying to lead you in a certain direction. You definitely hear it from players that have worn it on field. If they're a lineman or if there's somebody in a down position, they just don't feel like they're being pulled forward and towards the ground. So it's a really deceptive feel. I mean, until you really put it on your head and really get to experience it, it might not make a lot of sense. But when you get it on, it will feel much different than anything else you've worn.
I think, Matt,
sorry, go ahead.
And I think really interesting here, we've just touched on two really important attributes of a helmet, right? Which is fit, so our adaptive fit system, and then also sort of weight distribution, what we're calling balance. These are two very important elements of our helmet. However, they're both elements that cannot be assessed on a dummy head, right? And so when you think about sort of what we hear about helmet performance, it typically comes from a laboratory-based setting on a dummy head, which, granted, these are very important assessments and allow us to really sort of objectively analyze sort of impact mitigation. But when it comes to the field, these are things that, as Tom's highlighting, are very much experiential, right? You have to feel them, not only sort of when you first put it on, but throughout a practice, throughout a game, and throughout a season for sure. And so I think it just sort of highlights what you touched on, our overall sort of design philosophy of transcending the lab and making sure that on the field, a Xenith helmet performs, equally well.
Yeah, and I think, going back, Tom, to some of your examples, I mean, when players put it on and they start doing that, they comment a lot about the balance and the weight, that it feels lighter. But the other thing they say all the time is, God, this is so comfortable, right? And we've spent a lot of time in design and engineering studies to understand, what does that mean when we say comfortable, right? Normally a fairly subjective word, but we've done a lot to quantify and sort of objectify what we mean when we say comfort. So we've done some really wonderful pressure cap studies where we put a pressure cap on a player, put the helmet on, have them cinch it up, and then we can take real-time readings on various parts of the head to understand what is the pressure being applied to the helmet in all of those spaces. And what we see overwhelmingly is how evenly distributed that pressure is on the head, and that there aren't any hot spots, and not getting those really uncomfortable hot spots on the forehead or on the back of the head, or those ones that are very traditional with most helmets. And so that comfort piece that we know is so important, that others might say is really subjective, is something that we've been able to quantify and then become something that we design around, so that we can really keep the distractions to an absolute minimum on the field. Because players will tell you if the helmet's uncomfortable or it's not an enjoyable thing to wear, it's a distraction. They're irritated by it, and they're not thinking about the player. They're not thinking about what happens on the field. And that's something, again, to your point, Grant, that's not going to show up in a lab test, right? How much time is spent focused on what I have to do on the field, but we know when something's comfortable. There's no doubt that it just sort of disappears, and it's not something they're thinking about, so they can stay focused on what matters. So one of the other things too that I think is really important to call out that makes us unique is some of the materials and things we use for durability, right? And some of the collaborations we've done with some really high profile companies like BASF that have set us apart. I'd love, Grant, just quickly for you to touch on the development process of our novel polymer for the shell and what some of the attributes are there that are notable, and then maybe get into the face mask and other materials as well with Shadow XR.
Yeah, certainly some of the materials that we've utilized in Xenith Shadow XR really, make it stand out from the crowd. And I think you called out the shell in particular, which is a very novel polymer that we've innovated with the material science partner BASF. It's unique in that it's supremely durable, and we'll get into what that means in a second here, but also what you touched on is it's actually 10% lighter than comparable materials that are typically used in the industry for shells. And 10%, it might not sound like much, but it's all the more important because it's actually it's the furthest away from the head. And so why this is important is it comes back to that balance issue, right? And so the closer in you can bring sort of the mass or the weight of the helmet to the head, the smaller the package and the lighter the materials, the more balanced and the more agile it's going to feel. And so that's one of the kind of the main points of the shell, is that it is actually lighter, but you're not sacrificing any of that durability with the shell. And so when it comes to critical components like the shell, we are extremely robust and thorough in our testing. And so what we know is that, you know, a typical lifespan for a helmet could be as many as 10 years. That's a long time when you consider, you know, the number of impacts that a helmet's going to take through that lifetime. And so we've estimated that to be through, you know, some studies that we've done and some literature out there in the field. It's about 10,000 impacts to subject this component to. And so we actually do an accelerated aging test in the lab where we subject the helmet to over 10,000 comparable impacts in the lab to ensure that performance on day 1 is equivalent to performance on day 3,000. And so that's something that we've been able to dial in with the novel polymer shell that's on Shadow and Shadow XR, which is great. And then similarly, when you work your way inside to kind of the energy control layer, which I know we'll get into with the RHEON material, it's a similar dynamic there where you have to make sure that the primary components can withstand the rigorous lifespan of the whole helmet system. And so similarly, subjecting those to 10,000 cycles of impact to make sure that the energy control capabilities of that material is great on the first impact as it is on that 10,000th impact. So very unique materials and very rigorous approach to making sure that the helmet is, you know, great for that whole lifespan.
That's awesome. So I mean, clearly the material choices that we make are very intentional about maintaining that sort of performance corridor, but we also have a sort of industry unique reconditioning process, which Tom, I think would be great for you to kind of to dive into a bit.
So yeah, you know, with the way that we approach reconditioning, it is a little bit different than what's done in the marketplace. Of, you know, we first only recondition our own products. Nobody knows our products better than ourselves, so we utilize, you know, our factory trained technicians that all they know is our helmets. So they're going to pay a lot more attention to detail with the materials that Grant just touched on that are going onto the Shadow XR. And the other thing that's really unique is, you know, we have a comprehensive 5-year warranty on the helmet. Of, you know, really looking at this, it's a major investment for most programs. If you're, you know, a high school, a college, or even all the way down to the youth level, you know, this isn't a kind of a one and done type product that you're disposing of at the end of the year. You're making a significant investment both in protecting your athletes and as well as the financial piece. So through our all-in recon process of really looking at how do we help you, you maximize and protect that investment for the life of your product.
Yeah, that's a really, really important component and something I think we do extremely well. I'm super proud of the team there that handles that at our production facility. So we talked a lot about these various parts of the helmet, and I'm dying to get into the RHEON piece, which you kind of foreshadowed there, Grant, because I think of all of the exciting pieces to XR that we think that are truly unique and dynamic, I think the RHEON story and that partnership is a really incredible one to sort of let everyone kind of hear. I mean, it's an amazing material and has some properties that are industry unique for football, and I would love for you to dive into that a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's great in that, I mean, so RHEON Labs is a company out of the UK, which we partnered on this incredibly innovative sort of technology on. And RHEON is also what we call the material technology. So it's our collaborator here as well as the material solution. And really, it's nothing short of our biggest, I would say, single sort of advancement in Xenith helmet technology since the inception of the company, you know, roughly 10 years ago. And so I have here, you know, one of the RHEON shocks here in blue. Standard color will be more so the gray that you're seeing here in the clear shell. And it comes down to sort of two primary attributes of this new Xenith shock. One is the material, which is the RHEON material. And the second is the geometry. So how that material, what shape is that material formed into? On the material side, it is incredibly unique in the way it actually intelligently strengthens under impact. And so what I mean by that is when you think about the spectrum of impacts that an athlete will see throughout a game and a season and certainly a career, there are more frequent sort of lower level impacts. So many lower level impacts. Think of a lineman on the line, right? All the way up to sort of the less frequent but more severe impacts. So you have this great range of impacts which we have to control against and certainly design and engineer for. And what RHEON does is it maintains an optimal behavior to mitigate the energy at those low-level impacts as well as at the high-level impacts. And so that's enabled by this really intelligent behavior that we ascribe to it, where it actually strengthens under a higher speed impacts. So it actually better controls energy when it's impacted at lower speed because of the softness of the response, and then it stiffens up at those higher speed impacts. So it's the material, but then it's also important how you actually utilize that material and the geometry that it's formed into, not only from an energy control perspective, but you also want to bring the weight down, right? So you want to utilize the material as efficiently as possible. And so here, a really unique and novel aspect is what we call this reentrant geometry shape. So you can see it kind of looks like a castle, essentially a series of castles, which we call our RHEON cells. These cells are designed such that the top has a very soft compressive behavior. But again, as you engage more and more of that material, it stiffens up to better control sort of that loading curve as it comes into the helmet system. So better separating the athlete from the hit is the idea here. And so those are the two primary components. You have the material and then the geometry, which comes together into a really innovative RHEON shock in the Shadow XR.
Yeah, and it is a really exciting and impressive and very revolutionary adaptation for football. I mean, we've seen it in motorsports, and I think we discovered it in motorsports originally, or motocross. And so there's a lot of very high speed impacts and things to sort of manage there. One of the things I think is worth mentioning too is the nature of the kinds of impacts and impact forces that we're trying to manage, right? So we have what is very traditionally the linear sort of what people think of when you think of a football hit, right? The linear impact directly to the shock, but also the rotational energies that are so problematic for the athlete in terms of injury. So talking maybe a little bit about how the RHEON shock manages both of those, I think it'd be really great.
Yeah, you called out another great attribute of sort of the material and geometry coming together in sort of an optimally designed solution for football. And the two sort of impact sort of types that you called out there would be compression, so sort of that linear hit, which essentially compresses and compacts the shock, in which case you're taking energy out of that system through that compression. The other one, which you highlighted as being very important, especially with kind of what we know now about head health and sort of where the science is leading us, is the nature of sort of the rotational acceleration of the head. And so managing that through what we call sort of the shearing. So as you sort of, kind of topple the shocks over to the side to really manage that rotational acceleration of the head. And so the shearing capability of the shock has also been sort of optimally designed to really take that energy out during an impact.
It's awesome stuff. It really is. If those weren't exciting enough about RHEON as a sort of novel material, I mean, there's other attributes, Tom, that I know that are important for coaches and things that we should definitely chat about. I mean, the antimicrobial piece is a really exciting one, I think.
Yeah, and very timely, obviously, with what the world is facing currently. So I mean, that was an early point that a lot of coaches took a lot of interest in as we were going out earlier in the spring, late winter, early spring, in previewing XR with coaches. It's just the idea that a lot of these helmets, as much as as a manufactured helmets, we wish that they would treat them in a certain way, but the reality is schools only have so much space to store them and whatnot. So when we were discussing the properties that are inherent into this material of being antimicrobial, I mean, you could see a lot of coaches kind of perk up of like, wow, that's something that we haven't necessarily heard elsewhere or paid as much attention to. And obviously, with the changes that we've all gone through over the last month plus, will make it even that much more important. It's also easy to clean, as far as being able to, spray out the helmet, with water and be able to, clean it up. There's some additional things that I thought Grant might touch on, and maybe we can circle back around to, because where we touched on durability in the materials of the shell, RHEON also is a really durable material. So as we're talking through the energy control from Impact 1, it's again getting the coaches to see the lifetime value and performance of this is so important. So I don't know if we're going to circle back. Grant, have you touched on that one a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great point in that, I mean, equally important as the shell is sort of, this central component of the helmet, which is the energy control layer. We have to make sure that, impact number one, that energy is controlled in an optimal way, but then there's no performance degradation through that next 1,000, 2,000, to 10,000 impacts that athlete might experience, or certainly that helmet might experience across different athletes. So all the more important that, if a new athlete does receive a Xenith Shadow XR, the coach and the athlete can be sure that impact performance is going to be just as good as straight out of the box, so to speak. So the RHEON material is very unique in its durability, and especially its performance sort of maintenance properties. Another one to call out too, which kind of Tom touched on with some of the storage mechanisms that teams might use, is sort of the temperature resiliency of the material as well. And so we were very intentional about making sure that the performance of the RHEON shocks were maintained at extremely cold temperatures all the way up to very hot temperatures. We know that football is played in a variety of conditions, all sorts of temperatures, but also all sorts of elements. So when you think of moisture, rain, and so forth, there's virtually no impact on the RHEON material through a variety of environmental conditions. So another big win for the material.
Yeah, I mean, you think of, more traditional helmets, right, with air bladders. I mean, the ones that I sort of grew up with and played with in high school in a cold weather state like Michigan, those things can get really, really hard and uncomfortable in cold weather, right? And so I think we cannot understate how important that is, not only for the performance of the material, but also the comfort, right? I mean, it's a comfortable helmet at every climate, which is not something that all, manufacturers can say with those air bladder systems. And so I think it's certainly worth keying in on as a really important additional attribute to the RHEON material.
Yeah, and when you think of sort of temperature management as well, another really nice sort of attribute of really all Xenith helmets, and Xenith Shadow XR is no different. I'm not sure if the lighting's going to help us out here, but it's sort of the open architecture nature of the helmet. So there's not only large vents on XR, which is really enabled by our novel polymer, but also you can just see there's a lot of, intentionally designed and engineered perforations in the matrix, and then also sort of airflow all around the head, which really in those warmer temperatures, especially on some of the turf, and we get temperatures skyrocketing in those conditions, we want to make sure that that temperature is well managed through the helmet and get that heat out to keep a nice moderate temperature in there.
So all of these things that we've talked about today, I mean, are super exciting, right, for athletes, elite varsity athletes, college athletes, and so on. But I think one of the things that we'd be remiss if we didn't get into is the fact that we co-developed a parallel path youth product. And so not only do we have this incredible performance and material at that varsity level, we have a youth product that is specifically tuned and designed for the youth athlete and what they need. And oh, by the way, it's the #1 helmet on the Virginia Tech helmet rankings right now, which we're supremely proud of. I'm wondering if you could, Grant, just quickly go into some of the key differences between the youth and varsity Shadow XRs that are notable.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, a lot of commonalities in really positive ways. So for example, novel polymer shell across both varsity and youth. So same great durability and sort of performance across both. Same great RHEON core technology, so that incredible sort of step forward in helmet performance. A couple key differences as we come back to sort of that adaptive fit system. Looking at thousands of data points in the literature and our own sort of internal studies, we optimize the youth fit. So making sure that that youth athlete is getting the optimal fit for their head size, head shape, and so forth. So that's been really, to use your word, tuned in the Youth XR model for the youth athlete. And secondly, and equally important, is sort of the tuning and the engineering that went into the actual RHEON shocks in the youth model. And so by effectively optimizing them for the impacts that a youth athlete would see on the field, we were able to ultimately reduce sort of the entire package when you think about sort of the overall size of the helmet. And again, that comes back to not only optimizing impact performance, but making sure you're bringing in that overall package to increase the balance and increase that feel of agility and sort of that ability to move naturally in the field. Especially important for the youth athlete where, we know about sort of neck biomechanics being additionally important on the field for the youth athlete.
And Tom, from your perspective, I got to believe it's a super exciting development to have the #1 rated youth helmet in the market. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what you've seen, not only with direct team sales, but also in retail, and a little bit about the sort of programs we offer that allow folks to access these incredible products.
Yeah, no, it's definitely exciting to have the XR as part of the youth offering. Last year was the first year with the Virginia Tech independent testing on youth specific helmets, which we were really excited to have X2E Youth up at #2. So I think now having XR come out and being able to take the #1 position, at least in the current test results, is a huge step forward. I think customers are really excited about it. They've been paying a lot of attention to the communication and what we've been doing with the varsity launch that came out a little bit earlier than youth. So I think it's a great opportunity. And then, as far as, the types of programs and availability, getting outside of the team sales channel of, I believe Dick's Sporting Goods, will have some presence of both XR and X2E Youth, which we performed very well. If I remember correctly, I think X2E Youth was their #1 performing helmet last year. So we're really excited about the opportunity there. So it just kind of opens the door to get better brand exposure and make it more accessible to more parts of the country where helmets aren't provided by the youth organization. And then as far as the type of programs that we have in the team sales side, it really kind of runs the gamut of, we really are trying to do more of a focused approach of, really lean into each organization and identify what the biggest challenges they face are and being able to provide that level of protection. And then really try to come back with programs that are catered to each individual need versus trying to come out with a blanket program that either just sets a specific price or has certain benefits. So I just would really want and suggest that if you've got interest with or questions, reach out. We can get a team sales representative in contact with you to learn more about what you're trying to do in your organization and how we can better serve your needs and your kids.
Well, it's been an honor to do this webinar with you guys. This sort of new normal that we're in of thinking of new ways of outreaching and evangelizing our super exciting product. Any closing thoughts here before we call this one a wrap? Grant?
From our perspective, especially on the product innovation side, I think RHEON is very exciting for us as sort of this platform for innovation moving forward. So I think it's exciting just for us to really dig in and explore the possibilities of what's next in the helmet space for us. So, I feel like we're just sort of getting started, and already we have, Shadow XR is a great product to get on the field.
Yeah, no doubt. How about you, Tom?
Yeah, despite the challenges that everyone's facing right now, with the health environment, I think it's really exciting times, both for Xenith and for the sport of football. The sport really has needed some positive movement and some additional traction to be able to evolve the technology that's been available and do a better job through that. So I think it's really exciting times. We're amped up. We're definitely, like everybody else, anxiously awaiting for the new normal to settle in so that we can get back out and engage with coaches, parents, players at all levels. So I just really appreciate being part of this.
Yeah, no doubt. Again, it's been a blast to spend some time with you this morning. I think that's pretty much a wrap for Shadow XR. We will have a lot more sessions like this, in the next weeks to come. In the meantime, feel free to to go to zenith.com for any additional content, products, questions, other ways to win your home game. We want you to stay healthy and safe out there. And if you have any other questions, I would certainly encourage you to reach out to Tom Mercer at tmercer@zenith.com. Appreciate your guys' time, and stay safe out there.
Thank you.